This is a Fox News alert. Terror has returned to Lower Manhattan. An apparent Muslim extremist admitted several years ago to this country under a diversity visa, killed at least 8 people after plowing a rented truck through a crowd just a few blocks from Ground Zero. The suspect is called Sayfullo Saipov. He's a native of the former Soviet state of Uzbekistan. He reportedly shouted Allahu Akbar as he exited his vehicle before being shot in the hip and apprehended by the New York City Police Department. The mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, has called that attack an act of terror. Welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. He is in New York City. He's been covering this attack from the moment it happened. He joins us from the scene where it occurred. Shepard.
Tucker, the latest we have is that right now authorities in Passaic, New Jersey, which is about 15 miles from here, 45 minutes or so if you would be driving in New York City in regional traffic, they have surrounded a vehicle. And that vehicle is the vehicle they believe drove to the Home Depot there in Passaic, where he rented the Home Depot branded rental truck, which he then drove into Manhattan and at some point began this rampage somewhere around Houston Street when he got onto this separated bike path and drove south about 20 blocks to the location where we are now at Chambers Street, basically in the shadow of One World Trade Center. Along the way, he hit untold numbers of people, pedestrians, bicyclists. We saw the mangled remains of bicycles on the side of the road. As you said, killed officially now 8 people and injured at least 12. Our Catherine Herridge, our intelligence correspondent, is reporting that sources tell her he was here on a visa from Uzbekistan, came to the United States in the year 2010, had lived in Tampa and New Jersey, has expired identifications from both. Most recently, over the summer, according to the reporting of the New York Post, with which this channel shares common ownership, he'd been serving as an Uber driver as recently as the summer. A friend described him to the New York Post as a very nice man who didn't like taking pictures, who once drove him to an airport and has since been living a fairly nondescript life, at least until this. He is in surgery at last check, though that may have ended, I don't know, at Bellevue Hospital, a level 1 trauma center here in Lower Manhattan. He's under heavy police guard. There are a number of victims of his attack there as well, including one said to be in critical condition who was from Stuyvesant High School, which is very near here. That school reports 4 of those who were injured are from that school, 2 staff members and 2 students. Tucker, the investigation is just beginning.
So, Shepard, first to the picture we've got up next to you at the Home Depot in New Jersey. Just to clear that up, do authorities, they're not concerned there's anyone else involved? They're just staking it out?
They're very specific to say that they don't believe there's anyone involved. They say that they've been, my sources tell me that authorities have been processing that as another crime scene. They believe that he drove that vehicle to that Home Depot to pick up that truck that he then rented. I haven't been able to confirm exactly when he rented it, but I know they were doing forensic analysis on that vehicle to see what he left in there, if anything, to check for fingerprints. Again, trying to find out if there was anyone else involved. If they tell us that they believe nobody else was involved. Whether someone was involved in the planning, we don't yet know, but they believe that he drove there. There are security cameras there, according to authorities with whom I've spoken. They've been checking those tapes to see if maybe anyone was with him at the time. At this point, it's my understanding they don't believe anybody was.
So to the crime scene, how long do we know was he on the bike path?
About 20 city blocks at Houston Street, which for viewers who are around the country is the beginning, the northern edge of the Soho neighborhood, which stretches mostly to the river. This bike path travels right alongside the West Side Highway. If you were to look at a map of Manhattan, the far right side is a highway that goes all the way up, all the way to the Bronx, and all the way down to the very tip of Manhattan. And along that highway has been for many years a concrete bike path with lanes that go north and south. There are now green lights and red lights for bicycles so that cross traffic can go, and he went 20 blocks. One witness told the New York Daily News he traveled up to 40 miles an hour while on that trek. We don't know exactly how many he hit, but we know 8 are dead and 12 have been injured enough to be considered injured by hospitals. That injury number, I'm told, could go up tomorrow.
We've seen photographs of crumpled bicycles. Were most of them, do you know, bicyclists?
That is a bicycle-only path. In many areas, there's a pedestrian path as well where people might ride. In fact, along that path, there are bicycles with arrows showing which way you go north and which way you go south. It's well separated and well organized. In some areas, since the attack in Times Square, which happened a while back, when it was very much feared that it was a terror attack, it turned out to be a drunk driver, a very drunk driver, who went the wrong way on a one-way avenue and caused all kinds of carnage. Since then, they've put up new barriers along the way, but along this path on the West Side Highway, I tell you, if you were to come from the West Side Heliport, which is around 30th Street, and you're going to get onto the West Side Highway, you have to cross over this bike path. It's very easy to mistake it for a small road. I've seen cars take that right, thinking that they were on the street and not the bike path. So the early going, the hope was somebody made a mistake. Very quickly we realized that wasn't the case. This was a targeted terror attack, according to local authorities. He did this with malice and purpose.
Apparently, he crashed into a school bus toward the end of it. What exactly happened?
Well, at my understanding of this, according to police here on scene and others, he was driving down that street. The bus was in the cross. He crashed into the bus. Catherine Herridge is reporting tonight that bus contained physically challenged people, handicapped people were on that bus. I can't personally confirm that. And it was when he hit that bus and could no longer travel forward that he jumped out of that vehicle. Had in his hands, according to local authorities, a paintball gun and a BB gun, earlier described as a fake gun. And he was, as the police here put it, waving those around in the air, dodging in and out of traffic, which by this point in all the chaos had largely come to a standstill along the West Side Highway. And as he did, he screamed Allahu Akbar. And according to two police officers I've spoken with, one who's an authority figure, he told me he didn't say anything else, quoting, he wasn't in the mood to say, he didn't say anything and we weren't in any mood to talk to him. They gathered him up, took him to the hospital. He's on very heavy guard right now, Tucker.
Hit a bus of disabled school children after murdering bicyclists. Everything about this story is awful. Thank you, Shepard, for all of that. Dmitry Metlitsky was an eyewitness to today's attack in New York City, and he joins us tonight. Dmitry, are you there?
Yes. Hi. How are you?
Well, where were you and what did you see?
So I was driving on the West Side Highway in Uber, being a passenger, and then I looked down on a phone, and then suddenly my driver started yelling, "Look, there is a car mowing or running down the bicyclists and pedestrians." And when I looked up, I saw like 3 or 4 people lying on the side of a Stuyvesant High School, all covered in blood. At first, I thought that this is some sort of a Halloween prank.
Yes.
Because it's right across the school, and I saw today many people in sort of, blood makeup. So I presumed it's a prank, and I'm telling the driver, look, it's just kids doing a stupid joke, and he tells me, no, I have seen the car, plowing into people. And then very quickly, probably a minute or minute and a half, we were by the light. The unmarked police vehicle came, and 2 policemen ran from that car towards the light. And then I heard 8 or 9 very loud gunshots. And then we sort of hunkered down in that vehicle I was in. And then we sort of didn't know what to do because and then the police started waving us, go ahead. And then when I actually approached the intersection, I'm not sure whether it's a Murray Street or Chambers Street, I saw the what appears like U-Haul moving truck,
yes,
or some sort of I don't know if it's U-Haul, but like U-Haul type moving truck that has collided with a very large, like a delivery truck and a small school bus. And then they were waving us to sort of go forward, and then I saw actually 2 people on a West Side Highway. So one gentleman was lying with sort of blood on his torso. So it appears that he's been shot, though I didn't see him being shot. And then there was another sort of like a plump gentleman, almost like a naked, standing on his knees on the grass divider that separates West Side Highway from the street, and with his hands in the air like that. And then the police was sort of waving us, go ahead.
So there was a plump gentleman almost naked on his knees with his hands in the air. Who
Yes.
was he?
I don't know.
Well, I haven't heard that part of the story.
No.
Was anyone coming to the aid of the people who'd been mowed down?
So when it just happened, so first, like, no one, because I think maybe other people presume that this is the prank, but then I saw one of the sort of like people in front of me, sort of he opened his trunk and then, you know, got with his back and started actually running towards the people that were mowed down. So it looks like he was, I don't know, either paramedic or a doctor or something, right? Who was trained, but not in a uniform. And sort of, I think a lot of people thought that this is some sort of a prank because,
of course,
you know, people were sort of just walking and looking at the you know, at the wounded people. No one sort of realized that what has happened.
Yeah, that's always the case. People always think it's car backfiring or fireworks or a prank. I'd probably think the same. Thank you very much, Dmitry, for joining us tonight.
Thanks. I wish it was under different circumstances.
I do too. 5 hours after this horrible crime, what do we know about the suspect in the hospital tonight? Fox senior correspondent Rick Leventhal is on the ground in New York City, and he joins us tonight with an update. Rick?
Well, Tucker, we know his name, Sayfullo Saipov. He's an Uzbeki national, so born in Uzbekistan and made his way to the United States. He was 29 years old. He is 29 years old, born, I'm told, in February 1988. And authorities apparently recovered a driver's license from Florida. He's apparently spent time in Tampa, Florida, may have also had some New Jersey identification on him. Beyond that, the New York Post is reporting that he was an Uber driver, and friends say he was a nice guy. But what he did today has already been identified as an act of terrorism. And we were told early on in this investigation that the truck that he rented, a U-Haul rental truck, he drove it onto that West Side Highway bike path and drove down from Houston Street down to Chambers before he ran into a school bus. And you see the damage to the front end there. Initially, law enforcement sources told me the truck was rented in Jersey City. Apparently, that's a corporate office. That's where they first tracked it to, and then found that it had actually been rented from a Home Depot in Passaic, New Jersey. And that's where you see the van there surrounded by crime scene tape. Authorities obviously tracking whatever vehicle he might have driven to that Home Depot, looking for any evidence that might suggest why he did what he did. And obviously, Tucker, they want to know who this guy had contact with, who he spoke with online and elsewhere, and who else might have known about this, and perhaps who else might be plotting something similar. Of course, Tucker, here in New York City tonight, the Halloween parade ongoing. Up to 1 million people expected, and security extremely tight here across the city with heavy weapons teams, sand trucks blocking cross streets, and a lot of extra police officers on duty, on guard, on rooftops and elsewhere, on the lookout for any possible follow-up attacks. And the governor told us earlier, Tucker, also that airports, bridges and tunnels and other places would be even more secured moving forward, just because we don't know where this goes from here.
So you were the first one to report that this guy yelled Allahu Akbar as he exited the vehicle. Did a lot of people hear that?
There were witnesses who heard it, and there was law enforcement nearby. I'm not sure if that was one of the reasons why they were so quick to tell me that. But in fact, multiple law enforcement sources told me that they did hear this man, or someone heard this man yell Allah Akbar when he exited that truck after the accident and ran off, as you saw in that video there, into the intersection. He was holding two weapons that looked like guns. One was a paintball gun and the other one was a pellet gun, but they looked like weapons. He was flashing them, and it wasn't clear if he fired those weapons, but that's one of the reasons why the NYPD shot him. I was told he was hit twice. He's recovering in a hospital, in one of the hospitals where some of the victims were taken, Tucker, and obviously in very different places inside that hospital.
The whole thing is bizarre. Rick Leventhal, thank you for all of that.
Sure.
Dan Bongino is a former New York City Police Department officer. He joins us tonight. So Dan, given the fact set that we have now, 3 hours and 10 minutes after it happened, what does it add up to, would you say?
Yeah, Tucker, it adds up to a new normal, and a disturbing new normal at that. You know, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, AQAP, terror-affiliated groups that use this tactic figured out post 9/11, Tucker, that what's the sense of spending, you know, $500,000 to $1 million developing a flight training program, learning how to fly a plane, if you can cause an equal amount of terror impact in Nice, Barcelona, Berlin, and now New York City by running people down with a rental truck? And Tucker, the added benefit for these animals, these savages, is that these kind of tactics, renting a rental truck and mowing people down like an animal, doesn't leave that many investigative footprints. I mean, what are we going to have? A do not rent list? I mean, it's just not possible. Meanwhile, learning how to fly and doing all that other stuff leaves behind some investigative breadcrumbs we can track. This is very, very difficult to stop.
I mean, how would you even go about trying to stop it at the law enforcement level?
Well, that's good, because I don't like to come on your show and just complain. There is a way to at least hopefully make a dent. I think the country would be astounded if they realized, me being a former federal agent and a former New York City police officer, how few people of interest are under active physical surveillance. Now, listen, I'm a libertarian at heart. I think we've wasted a lot of time on mass data collection from people who have nothing to do with anything. But
right.
we've fallen in love, Tucker, with SIGINT, signal intelligence, collecting emails and social media, and we've fallen out of love with old school shaking of the trees in communities, an old expression for going into communities and developing high quality investigative sources. It's how we broke up the mob. It's how we can do it against this radical Islamic ideology. We're never going to stop this by being firemen afterwards. We have to be arsonists. We have to start the investigative fires in advance, because these kinds of attacks don't leave that many footprints if you don't have the sources to cut them off in advance.
But you've got an entire American political party organized to prevent that from happening.
Well, not only that, you have an entire American political party committed to open borders. I mean, seriously, this is a multipolar problem here. So yes, you have an American political party as well. Let me throw another one out there that's absolutely committed to the idea that we should never surveil, God forbid, in a mosque, because that may upset some people. Listen, nobody's saying anywhere, no credible personality anywhere is saying that all Muslims are involved in terrorism. That's absurd. That's a leftist, stupid talking point. But a mosque, Tucker, should not either be some kind of protected space. You and I both know if it was a Christian church professing that they wanted to blow up something, that of course law enforcement would be in there, thankfully so. But this has just gotten, this PC society is sickening, and it's damn dangerous to American citizens. And thank God we have a president who finally understands the threat, too, by the way. I mean, look where we'd be now if we still had this apologizing and not using the word terrorism anymore.
Have surveillance techniques changed in the last 10 years?
They have. I think, in my humble opinion, for the worse. We've fallen in love with electronic interception, and we've fallen out of love with the idea of old school physical surveillance.
Right.
Tucker, we don't have the capability right now to watch people who absolutely need to be watched. This is the entire known wolf problem, not lone wolf, known wolf. As Patrick Poole from PJ Media calls him, and he's right. Law enforcement's known about some of these people. Now, we don't know that in this case, to be clear, but there's no question in past cases we've known about people who have not been surveilled. We got to watch some of these people.
Well, so let me ask you a law enforcement question. I mean, probably not 2 hours after this happened, the governor of New York said pretty conclusively this was a lone wolf. We don't believe he has ties to any larger group or movement. I don't know if that's true or not. How could he know if that was true or not so soon after the crime?
He doesn't know that, Tucker, and that's a nonsense talking point. There are no more lone wolves. Let's throw that term into the dustbin of history. There are no more lone wolves. They have moved now to a franchise-type model where they understand that individuals can go out and just buy into their ideology on the internet, and ISIS and these other groups will lay claim to it. There's no such thing as a lone wolf. They're just embedded into the ideology through a different means than personal radicalization, which we had in the past. Forget lone wolf. That's an ideological talking point to make you believe that this is an isolated problem when it's not. It's a systemic problem, and we all know it. That's a political talking point, not a law enforcement one.
Yeah. In a world with an internet, it doesn't make any sense. Dan Bongino, thank you for that, as always.
Yes, sir.
Terror vehicle attacks like the one we saw in New York City today are increasingly common. What can be done about them? How does immigration play into all of this? This man was here on a diversity visa. What's that? That and more. We'll be right back. This is a Fox News alert. A man who appears to be a Muslim extremist murdered at least 8 people in New York City after he plowed a rented truck through a crowd just a few blocks from Ground Zero. Terrorist vehicle attacks like the one we just saw are becoming more and more common around the world, unfortunately. Trace Gallagher joins us with a look at similar attacks in recent days. Trace?
In fact, Tucker, in the past 11 months, there have been no fewer than 11 terror attacks around the globe using vans, trucks, and cars. ISIS has told its followers to use both vehicles and knives, and for the most part, sympathizers have followed that guidance, including in Barcelona, where an attacker plowed a van onto the famed La Rambla shopping district, killing 13. He then got out and fatally stabbed a woman. In London, there were 2 major attacks in 3 months. One on the Westminster Bridge, the other on the London Bridge. Both involved vehicles and knives. 11 people combined lost their lives. We've also had vehicle attacks in Paris, Sweden, Berlin, and right here in the U.S., where in November of last year, an Ohio State student of Somali descent drove into a crowd of students, then attacked them with a butcher knife, injuring 11. Not only is ISIS calling for vehicle attacks, it is also suggesting sympathizers rent their attack vehicles, causing the NYPD to do extensive outreach to truck rental businesses in the New York area. Watch.
After attacks on the German Christmas market, after Nice, we repeated those visits 2 more times, either by making telephonic contact, email, or going back to the same places. So the industry has had a high level of awareness on this matter from the NYPD.
High level of awareness, but tonight police are at a Home Depot in Passaic, New Jersey, investigating the rental used in today's deadly attack. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, thank you for that. Waleed Faris is a terrorism expert. He's advised the Mitt Romney and Donald Trump presidential campaigns, and he joins us tonight. Waleed, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
So this raises the obvious question, how did this guy get here? And it turns out he came under something called the diversity visa lottery that allows about 50,000 people to come into this country every year. They're given green cards. They have no connection to the United States and no skills, specific skills. Given that program, how can we vet for people like this?
Tucker, no matter what we do, in this case, previous cases, hopefully not, but future cases, the big V is the issue, vetting.
Yeah.
We need to have a strategic policy on vetting. Unfortunately, over the past 8 years, the previous administration did not want to do it. So right now we are in the beginning, the first step of trying to find ways to vet. But if you look at the problems, you have where they're coming from. We had a conversation about it over the past 4 hours. And then how are they going to go through the borders, through legal or illegal means? And once they're here, we heard he was a nice guy. But that has nothing to do with vetting.
No.
We need to establish vetting, and that needs the administration and Congress at the same time working together.
I'm almost 50 years old. I remember when things like this didn't happen in New York, ever. And now they seem to happen with some frequency. It seems obviously tied to immigration. Why is the country unwilling to have that conversation, to face that?
Because there is something in that conversation that is still taboo, which is the ideology. Don't touch the ideology, says the mainstream media, academia. Unless we change politically and intellectually, we're not going to get anywhere. And my concern here...
But how can a small group of people in charge of our country continue to lie to the rest of us and demand that the rest of us participate in their lies when everyone knows it's a lie?
Look, the rest of us is getting increasingly conscious. First, because of the debate. Second, because of social media. I mean, the world of social media is very different from the world of mainstream media.
Yes.
Younger generations are, I'm observing in them every day, they get it. The problem, they don't have the power. I mean, except elections, except voting, except expressing.
Interesting. What do you think causes the unwillingness of the people in charge, our elites, our ruling class, whatever you want to call them, to just be honest about it? Not attack anyone, not be bigoted or unreasonable, but just note what is clearly going on. Why are they resistant to that?
Probably 2 reasons, historically. One is the fact that they don't know. Those who are advising them, I mean, I'm going to be very honest here, it comes from the classroom. It comes from actually campuses. Social scientists have been telling us and telling many generations that you do not address this because this is the wrong argument. So we need to have a change, a reform in academia, and how we teach the Middle East, and how we teach...
So they're basically making a religious argument. You shouldn't talk about this because it's naughty and immoral.
That is from one perspective. The other perspective is interest. Some elites have been convinced that if you start addressing the ideology, the Arab and Muslim world is going to be furious. Guess what? The Arab and Muslim world is changing. If you listen to what the Egyptians and UAE and even the Saudis recently and others are saying, of course you need to talk about the ideology. They are saying that, and we're still behind.
So you're saying that the Saudis are freer about talking about Muslim extremism than, say, the Hillary Clinton campaign?
I don't want to name political parties now, but I would say that the elites, at least in the Arab and Muslim world, from many countries, are now more aware than our elites when dealing with it, academia and politics and media, unfortunately. They're more advanced than us on this.
That is a profound indictment of our ruling class, I would say. That's depressing. Thank you for joining us, Walid Phares.
Thank you.
Another terror attack with a car raises questions about how these attacks could have been prevented, if they could have been at all. Aaron Cohen is a former Israeli special operations officer and counterterrorism expert. Michael Baboni was a New York State deputy secretary for public safety, and they both join us tonight. Aaron Cohen, first to you. Is there a series of tangible steps, I hate to even ask this question, but that might have prevented something like this, or do we need to accept it?
Well, Tucker, I think that there are steps, but I think it's going to require an entire new calibration of the way we look at handling our defense and for security operations here in the States. And I think that involves essentially putting together some type of task force on the national level to start looking at soft targets on the macro picture, meaning wherever there's going to be crowds, we have to deploy some type of system. In this case, I think bollards would have been a very fair play had those been in place. Not pointing my finger at New York at all. The point of this type of task force for soft targets specifically, and I think this should come down from the president, if you will, would be to essentially create all of the layers necessary to incubate and change as we see these attacks continue to form here in this country. So with the vehicles, it's not the first time we've seen this. Shepard just reported, or excuse me, Trace just reported that there's, what is it, a dozen vehicle attacks stemming from Europe. Obviously, they're coming here. And I think everybody here wants to be safe. So things like bollards, things like how we put down manpower at large events where there's large crowds of people. What can we do to help augment law enforcement who's already bogged down? It's a really...
It's a great question. Michael, I wonder, we just lost Aaron there for a second, if maybe the lesson of this attack is if you can kill 8 people and wound 15 others with a rental truck, maybe there's no stopping people who are intent on hurting you.
So, Tucker, this is an incredibly jarring incident only because these are the first terrorism-related deaths since 9/11 in the city of New York. And that message in and of itself brings back the question that all New Yorkers have asked themselves since 9/11, are we safe? And that has been the focus of the New York City Police Department and the federal agencies. And how do you put into place systems that you can protect the populace? The NYPD put in years ago a Lower Manhattan Security Initiative, which essentially is an interlocking web of cameras, plate readers, and intelligence finds within the Lower Manhattan area. And they've tried to move this into the rest of Manhattan. The challenge is, Tucker, you pointed this out, is you have a guy who perhaps was not on anybody's radar screen, who gets radicalized and then decides to do this. Renting a truck is not a crime. Driving into the city of New York is not a crime. And yes, bollards, certainly for areas like in Times Square, after they had an incident earlier this year when they had a guy who was basically committed a crime and tried to escape with a car and killed some pedestrians. Yes. They put up bollards. So you can do that in terms of mass gatherings, but when you have this kind of random attack that has no basis for it, it's very, very difficult to respond.
It looks hard. Michael, thank you for that. The FBI, by the way, is asking for tips tonight from anyone who has seen anything or knows anything about this suspect. The toll-free number for the FBI is 1-800-CALL-FBI. Do that if you have relevant information. We're going to be right back with a rolling coverage of the first significant terror attack in New York City since 9/11. Stay tuned. Back, so we've got some news. This reporting at this hour by the New York Post that the driver had pledged allegiance to ISIS, and we know that because apparently he left handwritten notes in his vehicle saying so, along with an image of an ISIS flag. Both of those, according to the New York Post, found in this man's vehicle. Well, New York, of course, is reeling from that terror attack this afternoon. At least 8 people were murdered. after this man who was in custody, apparently being treated at Bellevue Hospital for 2 gunshot wounds tonight, drove a truck, a rented one, into a mass of people, screaming Allahu Akbar as he fled the vehicle. The city, though, is durable as always. Fox senior correspondent Eric Shawn joins us from the site of the Halloween parade, which has gone forward with about 1 million people despite the attack. Eric?
Yeah, hi, Tucker. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said it. New Yorkers are tough and strong and resilient, and if there's any indication of that, it is the annual Halloween parade here tonight. And over here, excuse me, guys, I want to show you something new. This is a police car, as you can see, parked on the side street. That just in case anyone tried to replicate what happened earlier today. This is parked at all the side intersections that show the parade. This parade, as you can see, is known to be wild and outrageous, humorous, and they are out here in force in spite of and perhaps in response to the tragedy earlier today. The costumes creative and crazy. It really is a celebration of life. Those who are here tonight told us that despite the tragedy, they decided to come out because it's important for this country to be defiant.
I hesitated to come out, and then my friend said, no, go have some fun and just be careful. So I'm here.
I refuse to live in fear. Absolutely not. This is about having fun and the whole bit. I refuse to live in a box.
Belgium?
That's right, we're from Belgium.
And you heard that a Belgian victim of the terror attack today?
Yeah, I just got notified a quarter ago. Yes, I did.
What are your thoughts? It didn't keep you from coming out tonight.
We were hesitating a lot because we're parents of 2 young daughters, so we're hesitating. But as your mayor, I think, told, we shouldn't be stopping from doing what we wanted to do.
Well, despite those discussions and those feelings, as you can see, it is still ongoing. The mayor earlier said that we should respond to and face the terror threat.
I want to ask all New Yorkers, all Americans, to keep the families of those lost in your thoughts and prayers. They will need our support. And I want to ask all New Yorkers to be vigilant. We know it's Halloween night.
Governor Andrew Cuomo also saying that we will endure, of course, Tucker, as you can see, the spirit of New York City and the spirit of America continuing despite the tragedy. Live on 6th Avenue, Eric Shawn, back to you, Tucker.
Thanks a lot, Eric. This just in, apparently the bomb squad has shown up at that Home Depot in New Jersey where the suspect apparently rented the truck he used to murder 8 people earlier today. We don't know why. We assume they're afraid that there's a bomb in the vehicle. Obviously, we'll bring you the latest as we get it. Well, how does a young Muslim man like this radicalize and turn to terror? A couple months ago, he was driving an Uber. Everything seemed fine. Today, he's in the hospital, and he's going to be charged with mass murder. Majid Nawaz was once an Islamic extremist himself. He now campaigns against extremism, and he joins us this evening. So tell us what you think was going through this guy's mind as he murdered strangers with a truck.
Well, Tucker, it's sad to say that what was going through this mind is that he believes himself to be part of a global jihadist insurgency, which is why people who claim this is a lone wolf absolutely do not understand the nature of the threat that New York and America and the rest of the world is facing right now. This person clearly saw himself as a soldier among the soldiers, as ISIS likes to claim, the soldiers of Allah in a global jihad. And that's what we're facing, an insurgency that is across borders and across countries and has hit us at home here in London, across Europe, and from Europe. This style of ISIS-style street attacks in trucks and lorries has finally and sadly come to the city of New York as well.
So this man did not see himself as alone at all.
Absolutely not. And actually, you know, whether it's through the slogans he was chanting, as is reported, Allahu Akbar, which has been a slogan that has been hijacked by jihadists. It's mentioned in the Muslim prayer, but they mention it whenever they kill people, or any other form of flag or symbol that has been found in his possession. All of these indicate that he clearly saw himself as part of a global phenomenon. I think it's also important that we understand that he arrived in America in 2010 from Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan has a long long history, both on the one hand of struggling with a tyrannical, despotic regime, and on the other hand, the opposition having been hijacked by the so-called Islamic movement of Uzbekistan, which is a jihadist movement that has strong ties in Central Asia, strong ties in the Xinjiang region of China, where there's also an armed uprising going on, and strong ties with the Taliban terrorists as well. And I think it's incredibly dangerous for us to assume that this man had no, at least ideological connections with his fellow travelers in the global jihadist insurgency.
You are one of the clearest and most informed voices on the subject. I really hope that our policymakers are listening carefully to you. I mean that. It's always an honor to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Up next, more on why this happened, how it might be prevented next time, and what it means. Jillian Turner, former NSC staff, and James Woolsey, former director of the CIA. Join us. This is a Fox News alert. Apparent extremist and murder suspect Sayfullo Saipov left a note, apparently, in the truck he used as a weapon earlier today. In that note, he pledged allegiance to ISIS. There was also an image of an ISIS flag found in his truck. Two pretty obvious signs. What else should we be looking for in this investigation? Jim Woolsey is the former director of the CIA. Jillian Turner worked at the White House National Security Council under two presidents. They both join us tonight. Director Woolsey, how likely is it that this guy had some direct contact with foreign extremists?
I think it's quite likely, but even if it wasn't direct, and it doesn't have to be, it can operate through the internet, through various types of media, through software, through Facebook, et cetera. There are lots of ways to communicate radicalism. I think the thing that we have to pay attention to is that wolves travel in packs, and the lone wolf notion really needs to get put on the shelf and hauled off and used once in a blue moon. That's not what's going on, lone wolf after lone wolf. This is part of the world Islamic jihad, and I think ever more clearly so.
So, Jillian, we've broken the back of ISIS in some ways. They no longer have vast swaths of territory under their control, but you're hearing people say that maybe you're going to see the group metastasize around the world and an increase in attacks like this. Do you think that's possible?
Well, it already has, from my perspective. It is true that just 2 weeks ago we had the seminal week, where we reclaimed, the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces reclaimed Raqqa, the headquarters, the capital of ISIS's caliphate. But the problem is, while we are now definitively winning the ground war against ISIS, the real fight has migrated, and the battleground is no longer inside Iraq and Syria, but it's really online, it's in cyberspace. And in that sense, ISIS has truly now established a global reach, because through social media and through the internet, they can penetrate virtually every country on earth and find sympathizers. And that's the frightening new reality. I think this is the biggest challenge. If we talk about challenges for the Trump administration, this is their number one, their biggest challenge when it comes to fighting radical Islamic terrorism.
Director Woolsey, are you satisfied the U.S. government does its best to prevent ISIS sympathizers from moving here?
No, we're not doing our best. We should not be in the business of excluding people because of their religion. I think President Trump made a big mistake when he started out that way with the travel ban, but he got it right the second time around. When he started talking about limiting people coming from particular countries. The president has to be able to do that, I think, in order to maximize his ability to protect all of us. And I think we also, and one of your earlier guests made this point, we need to have law enforcement effectively living and working and operating inside the parts of the country, the parts of cities, the organizations, the institutions like mosques, where there are problems from Islamic radicalism, extremism, jihadism. And stay on top of that, because that's the only way you're going to get some kind of advance notice of what may occur. You can't win just by sitting back on your heels and waiting for the attackers to break out their knives and trucks.
I wish we had more time for this. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Tucker.
How should President Trump respond to this latest attack on the United States? For that, we turn, as we often do, to Fox senior political analyst Brit Hume. So, Brit, what's traditionally the president's role right now in something like this?
Well, the president attempts to, relay a message of strength and confidence and calm and reassure people and express determination that this terrible enemy will, in the fullness of time, be defeated. What I would note, though, Tucker, about this moment is that it coincides, as Jillian was just saying earlier, with the evident, almost complete defeat and rout of ISIS from its headquarters in Raqqa. This was a moment we've been waiting for a long time, because a lot of our counterterrorist strategy stemmed from the idea that if we crush these ISIS forces where they have established this caliphate, and we deprive them of the image that was thought to be so inspiring to up-and-coming potential terrorists, that they were winners, that the impulse to join them and to participate as their agents around the world would dissipate. Now, maybe it will. But at the moment, it is striking that this attack occurs just as that other development is happening.
I wonder if the people who said that, and you often heard people say that, really believed it was that simple. Are they so simple that they believed it was that simple, or are they just saying that?
No, I don't think anybody ever said it was that simple. I think they said that, one of the things you need to do in order to suppress this stuff is to deprive ISIS of its image as the ascendant force, right, as the team to be on. Now, it should also be said that one of the things that's bound to happen over time is it will become clear, as if it hasn't already, to millions around the world, that these attacks, as hideous as they are and as much as we mourn the losses, cannot possibly bring down Western civilization. It simply, these attacks cannot do that. Bigger attacks cannot do that. It is a hopeless undertaking. Now, that doesn't mean they won't keep trying, and it may mean, and it doesn't mean that many of them are so imbued with the idea that they have such a reward in heaven that when they give themselves up for Allah and commit acts of mass murder, that the glory is going to be so great that it'll make up for the pain and risk they're undertaking. You can't completely account for that. But those are a couple of things that are worth keeping in mind, it seems to me, tonight.
That's wise advice, as always. Brit Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
I want to take you to break with live pictures of the Home Depot in New Jersey. Apparently the bomb squad, there's a hand in front of the camera, has been called out. The car the suspect left there under inspection, that's the Empire State Building, of course, lit up tonight in red, white, and blue. Up next, Zuhdi Jasser. Tell us about the reaction from the world's Muslim community to what we saw this afternoon in New York.